Hi there, my name is Carolina Marcus, and this is the Women in Business presentation on Ireland. So, to start things off, we want to talk about Ireland's journey in history terms. So, it all started with its independence from British rule, which officially occurred in 1922, but actually started in a revolution in 1916. And this all basically laid the groundwork for a very complex mosaic of both cultural and economic dynamics. It all started when Northern Ireland, who was predominantly Protestant, chose to remain part of Great Britain, and that led to a bunch of tensions and conflicts, both religious and economic. On the other hand, the conservative forces in post revolution Ireland ended up associating Irish patriotism with Catholicism, the Gaelic language, and agrarian nations. The early chapters of Ireland's history unfold with a lot of Celtic conquests, St. Patrick's Christianization, and the Golden Age of learning and Viking invasions. So it's a very culturally diverse when you think of from that perspective. This oppression that was endured during the English rule, basically encapsulating laws restricting Catholics, spurred periods of rebellion, like we talked about, and basically just climaxed Ireland's hard fought struggle for independence. This whole historical narrative just shapes the contours of Ireland's modern socioeconomic and cultural landscape. Mainly, we're going to focus throughout this presentation a lot on religion and the influence of the Catholic Church, who was already historically powerful in that area and has decreased a little bit due to factors such as obviously secularism, prosperity, and some revelations of like priestly abuse that we're going to see later on. But despite this decline, the Catholic Church is very, very renowned still in Ireland and manages a significant portion of Ireland's educational and healthcare institutions. Also, this emphasis that they have when it comes to economic development and being an agrarian nation also hindered Ireland's economic progress until its entry into the European Economic Community, which happened in 1973. After that, Delta membership with the European Union also facilitated the rapid growth of their economy between 1995 and 2009. And that's how they got the nickname Celtic Tiger. However, the global economic recession that we all heard of in 2008 brought a lot of consequences with mass immigration and a bailout from the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Overall, to understand Ireland, we must also understand the importance of country places on communication. Historically, the Irish, celebrated for their love and their language and conversation, has been synonymous with eloquence, vibrant discussions, and success where the fields where English is pivotal. Because of that, I want to talk about demographics so we understand where most of the people are. So, as we see, 40% of them do live within 100 kilometers of Dublin, and the west of Ireland is characterized by limited opportunities and just smaller population. And they do tend to, their culture does reflect a village like perspective with like some strategic advantage in its geographic location because also of the link between North America and Northern Europe. Lastly, I want to talk about the importance of communication as a metaphor for understanding Ireland. So, as I spoke to a little bit before, communication for the Irish is not just a means for conveying information, it's not just a trade off. It's a cultural cornerstone. It's a metaphor that reflects the intersection of the Gaelic and English influences and their languages. So, as the transition from Gaelic to English unfolded, the Irish retained a distinct linguistic style, infusing a lot of imagery in their conversations, a lot of eloquence and passion. This linking for the storytelling and the vivid expression, historically integrated with social discourse, shaped this artistic and very imaginative, creative narrative style that is found in Irish culture. The richness of this conversation is deeply rooted in the country's historical context, which until the 1980s, they remained predominantly rural, which we talked about as an agrarian nation, and guided by a lot of conservative leaders who championed agrarian life over the era of industrialization. And this real exciting conversation became kind of like an art form. So they cherished pastime that often outshined the importance of food, even. So a lot of playful banter, which they called slagging matches, where witty remarks are exchanged, and it's just a beloved tradition that reflects this immense significance in Irish life. Lastly, as we do talk about communication, I spoke before how Catholicism is very tightly related to anything related to Irish culture. We must understand that prayer is another form of conversation and holds an immense significance in Irish people's lives. With 84% of the population being Roman Catholic, Sunday Mass attendance remains one of the highest globally, even though it has been declining recently. Catholic households are adorned with crucifixes and religious pictures that reflect the strong connection between faith and daily life. This spiritual conversation, this trade off, this back and forth extends beyond the church. It also manifests in acts of goodwill and charity. Overall, the Irish is guided by a robust ethical and moral system, and they have been notable contributors for international relief efforts, just demonstrating a lot of commitment to aiding those in need through this communication.
So, Ireland's social structure and identity are shaped by a mix of history, religion, education, and language. So, the social structure of the government specifically began with a long history of British rule, and the English became increasingly involved in Ireland's affairs, and English and Irish culture began to mix until it was outlawed. For example, English people couldn't marry Irish people, they couldn't carry Irish last names, and so on. And after King Henry VIII began exerting control over different Irish lands, many of his successors continued to do the same. And for decades in Ireland, it remained an agrarian nation, and many were resistant to change to an industrialized society. Eventually, they did become one, and Dublin, for example, provides approximately 40% of Ireland's gross national product, and about one third of the entire country's population lives in Dublin. And as a result of the emphasis of trying to keep an agrarian nation, Ireland didn't advance economically as quickly as a lot of other European nations. And for its independence, Ireland did become a free nation in 1922 after a revolution that began in 1916. So Britain finally yielded and accepted the independence of Ireland as a nation, but Northern Ireland decided to remain separate and they stayed joined with Great Britain. And for a few years, there was tension between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and a lot of it was based on religion, since Ireland is primarily Roman Catholic, while Northern Ireland is primarily Protestant. So, for social identity, the typical Irish family tends to be super close-knit, and its members like to describe their activities of their day to each other in great detail. And this tends to take place at family dinners, because mealtime in the Irish household is never usually missed by a family member. So the conversations could be anything from daily activities, so parents asking children about schools, or they might talk about news on their neighbors and distant relatives because they actually care about what goes on with each other. For family dynamics, Irish parents do tend to be strict with their children, and they do define their own rules that should be followed. So some Irish children are given a lot less freedom compared to American or even English children. And sometimes they're told, like, one of their rules is to spend all day with their parents on Sunday. So this could be dancing, church, or even going to the pub. And talking about pub life, and that's also a very big part of the social identity of Ireland. Young and old people mingle in the club. It's kind of open to all ages to a certain extent. So they converse with one another about their opinions, but they were raised with a certain respect for their elders, and they're able to carry a conversation with each other regardless of their age or their background. And even if they don't agree with one another's opinions, they do usually respect each other. So for language, um, obviously, as we spoke about before, Ireland remained relatively agrarian until about the 1980s. And because of this, it's easy to see how talent for conversation was an art form. And that's because there was not much to do for recreation since it was an agrarian society. And for the Gaelic language, Gaelic to the Irish was very graphic and it was a live language that gave Irish the opportunity to express themselves and express their ideas in a storytelling type of manner. And for example, a lot of people that have read Irish books or poems, they come away feeling like they were experiencing whatever the author went through. And for the intersection of the Gaelic language and the English language, the Irish created vivid images in the Gaelic language, and they express these in English, but English is very direct and generally very clear. So the vivid imagery of Irish writers originated from their storytelling ways, which they consider to be a critical part of their social conversations. And for religion, as Carolina touched on earlier, about 84% of the Irish population is Roman Catholic, which is compared to Northern Ireland, who are mostly Protestant. And regular attendance at Sunday Mass is about 35%, which is actually one of the highest figures for regular weekly attendance amongst multiple nations. And a lot of Catholic households in Ireland also have crucifixes or religious pictures in their house to just show how dedicated they are to the religion. So, for the church, the Irish state relies on the works of the Catholic Church to support a lot of its social service programs. So, for example, a lot of hospitals in Ireland are run by the Catholic Church rather than by the state governments. So, hospitals might be partially funded with state money, but they're staffed with nuns. And that's a good example of that. As for school systems, the national school systems or the national school state systems is also under the control of religious order in Ireland. So even though the state might fund it, a lot of the schools are run by local boards, which are in turn controlled by the clergy. So there are separate schools for different major religions. So local Catholic schools will be managed by local priests while Protestant schools have vicars that manage the schools. And a lot of the instructors and teachers at schools are nuns or brothers of the church. And for good morals, a lot of Irish people just conduct a lot of acts of good work, and they stem directly from their strong ethics and morals, which obviously come from their religion. They're quick to donate their time and energy and even their lives to some people if they're in extremely bad conditions. And in the past, even though there's been a few problems between Catholics and Protestants, Catholics actually enjoy having Protestants in their communities and they treat them with good respects, which I do think stems from their good character and morals. So, overall, the different elements in Irish social structure and identity intertwine with the metaphorical importance of conversation in Ireland. Conversations, which are lively and detailed, represent not just the exchange of information, but an art form that is deeply embedded in the social structure of the country. Whether it's expressed through storytelling, playful banter, or even prayer, communication and conversation is an important part of Irish life.
I will now be talking about Ireland's economy. After gaining independence from Great Britain in 1922, Ireland was primarily an agricultural nation with little economic development. The European Economic Community allowed Ireland's economy to advance to some extent in 1973. The European Economic Community is now known as the European Union. The European Union further expanded Ireland's economy due to the policy where poor European Union nations benefited from wealthier European Union nations. Ireland, in this context, was known as a poorer European Union nation. Immigration has always been an issue in Ireland due to the lack of jobs, and Ireland has still struggled over time to keep unemployment rates low. However, the economy took a swift turn in 1995 and Ireland became known as the Celtic Tiger. Reasons for this swift economic growth include low corporate taxes, low wages, a stable national economy, adequate budget policies, European Union membership, and European Union subsidies, which is that policy that I referred to. This period lasted until 2008-2009 when the global economy took a hit. The Celtic Tiger period was a period of rapid economic growth for Ireland, and the most notable reason for growth is the European Union membership because of that policy. However, this all came to a halt in 2008 with the global economic crash. And Ireland's government was offered a loan from the European Union National Bank and International Monetary Fund to help mitigate this economic issue. However, this loan left the Irish people paying high taxes to pay off this debt, leading to a high unemployment rate. And this caused around 400,000 residents to move out of Ireland, causing another spike in immigration. So some economic demographics today. Economically, the country has witnessed a significant shift from over 60% of the workforce engaged in agriculture in 1970 to merely 5% today. Primarily, people are moving into bigger cities such as Dublin, Cork, Limerick, and Galway, and they've found more opportunity there for work. And the workforce is youthful. 20% of the population is under the age of 15, and there's a lot of tech starting up in Ireland. And of course, the GDP per capita has increased rapidly. It was 2,500 in 1950, and now it is just under 50,000 today. And so for this reasons, Ireland is deemed a successful country for business. Of course, there's a lot of growth, and there definitely is some opportunity for businesses in Ireland.
Now we will discuss doing business in Ireland. In Ireland, family and business often intersect. 7 out of 10 Irish businesses are family-owned, and this type of enterprise is a major contributor to the economy. Family businesses in Ireland employ more people than state and foreign businesses combined. Family businesses in Ireland adopt a long-term view of success instead of acting in the interest of quick gains of profit. The importance of family business increased following the pandemic as the population made a united effort to support small businesses during this trying time. Ireland is the most popular location in the EU for foreign direct investment. This is in part caused by the low corporate tax rate there. FDI in Ireland is driven largely by the United States. The most popular FDI industries in Ireland are pharmaceuticals and integrated control technology. Microsoft and Google have both set up their European headquarters in Ireland. In 2022 alone, FDI created 32,000 new jobs in the country. In recent years, Irish companies have begun to place a stronger emphasis on corporate social responsibility. Irish companies were late to adopt CSR policies in comparison to businesses in surrounding nations, so it makes sense that CSR is more prominent in multinational firms than local Irish businesses. The Irish government created the 2014 National Plan on Corporate Social Responsibility to increase awareness of CSR and its benefits. The government's intention for creating the plan was to make Ireland a center of excellence for responsible and sustainable business practices. This plan created the National Stakeholder Forum, which releases CSR resources for Irish businesses. The Irish are not a very time-conscious culture, so Irish individuals are often not punctual for business meetings. Despite the frequency of their tardiness, the Irish will rarely be more than 15 minutes late. There is a dual standard when doing business with foreigners. If an individual is in Ireland for a business meeting, they are still expected to be on time, even if their Irish counterpart is going to be late. This relaxed sense of time also applies to negotiations and deadlines. In Ireland, decisions are made slowly and without urgency, and the Irish are open to extending deadlines past their original due date. One factor that often slows decision-making is that the Irish enjoy engaging in debate. Although Americans believe that discussing religion and politics is taboo, Irish individuals will often debate these topics. In 2023, the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Bill was passed. This bill provides more flexible working options to employees in Ireland. Ireland is one of few countries that have passed a bill of this nature. One standout aspect of this bill is an allotment of breaks for breastfeeding women. Additionally, employees that are responsible for taking care of loved ones have the ability to tailor their work hours to meet their unique needs. This bill is beneficial for firms as they are not losing valuable talent to unique family situations, but it can be difficult for smaller and less developed companies to meet all the requirements. This concludes our discussion of doing business in Ireland.
Okay, thank you, Lexi. Hi everyone, I am Ashley Lane, and I will be summing up everything that we learned and giving some recommendations for how to proceed when dealing with Ireland in business transactions. So our first recommendation is relationship building. As we have mentioned, the Irish people are very social and they love that human interaction. So when leading Irish and doing business transactions, it is advised to be goal-oriented, but also have that relationship-based. And we include trust in this because the Irish are very trusting and they expect that in return. And so they don't want to be deceived, they don't want to be lied to. So going into a relationship with trust and understanding those concepts. In addition, the Irish want to respect the hierarchy. And so the way that they do their business structure is a hierarchy, so a top and a bottom. Similar to ours in the sense that you know who to report to, you know your role, you know who's above who, that sort of thing. However, what is different in Ireland, I think is very fascinating, is that it is expected that managers and supervisors are to be open and to help anyone, no matter where they are in the hierarchy. And so this relates to a low power distance in the sense that the higher ups can talk to the lowers, lower in the hierarchy, and it's very normal practice, which I thought was very cool. And then, of course, going into our pubs and alcohol recommendations, we have come to see that Ireland is very focused in their culture and the pubs and their culture with alcohol. When you go to a pub, you are expected to drink, in the sense that the Irish don't believe in drinking alone. So when you go into a pub and a bar, keep that in mind. In addition, pubs tend to be a more rowdy place. Like Lexi had mentioned, the Irish believe in talking about politics and engaging in those very thought-provoking and very opinionated conversations. So pubs can be very rowdy, but it's all in good fun and they just want to spark a conversation. So just things to keep in mind about that. In addition, sincerity and personality, the Irish are looking for open and honest communication. Again, this goes back to the idea of relationship building and trust that comes in. They want to hear you talk about, your life as well as how their life is going as well. So keeping that conversation and that open communication flow is very key and vital in business, as well as understanding the Irish personality, which tends to be very stubborn. The Irish like their opinions and they like to voice their opinions, and they typically don't like compromises. So knowing those few ideas when drafting changes or when trying to install a new innovation would be very helpful to know upfront. And again, this goes back to having that relationship and having that trust in the very beginning. They would be more likely to hear you out and to hear your ideas for the future when you have that trust and when you have that relationship at the beginning. And then moving into HOSFED dimensions. So here you can see on the left with the power distance, it is relatively low. It's actually very low at 28. This here goes back to the idea of, again, this hierarchy with the top of the hierarchy interacting with the lower of the hierarchy, and that just being very normal because the power distance is extremely low. And then moving into individualism, this is very comparable to the United States in the sense that Irish employees are expected to be self-starters. They're expected to be show some self-reliance and take initiative for all their projects. And then here in motivation towards achievement and success, this is pretty high. This is showing that the Irish have a very competitive culture. They want to strive to be the best that they can be. So going in with goals that the Irish culture can certainly meet, but also challenging them would be a very good idea and a recommendation that we have. And then looking over here with uncertainty avoidance being at 35, this is showing that the Irish are willing to take those risks. They're willing to be creative and to take on that innovation edge, but they want to keep that open communication going and to use more practical words and not so much like technical words, was the advice that was given through HOSFED Dimensions. And you can see here on the long-term orientation, it can go either way. So no recommendations necessary on that front. And then you can see here at the end with indulgence, it's very high at 65, same as the US. And this shows that the Irish culture is, again, very indulgent. They like their free time, they like their leisure. And so when they're with family, and they're shutting the page on work. So things to keep in mind when speaking with the Irish and when they are with their family.
So, to wrap everything up and to kind of sum up the most important aspects in Irish culture that would fuel decision making, the first thing we would like to recommend is placing high importance on relationships. As we mentioned, the Irish are very fond of family, they value their leisure time, and they ultimately want to trust their business partners. Honesty and trust is one of the biggest things for them. So, having those interpersonal skills and effective communication will be key in coming to decisions in this culture. It's also important to notice that Ireland has a high value in their labor units. So making sure that even the lowest employee on the hierarchical structure is also being taken care of is something very crucial. The Irish will confront situations head on, and they're going to be stubborn in their own opinions. So knowing this ahead of time allows you to formulate a plan to introduce any changes that will require time and trust from both sides. An agile approach to this also might be the best, like taking things slow and making sure everybody's understanding of what's going on. And in addition to that trust, it's important to note that is sensitive information and how to handle it with care. So while the Irish will tell the world their business as they are very open people, keeping sensitive information private will be a very smart move in making decisions. On the flip side, Americans are also usually very open with their information. So in fact, there's an Irish saying that say you can lift an American and by the time you separate, you know how much more about the person than you care to know. So knowing those cultural contracts with American is very, very important, and establishing a chain of command that dictates who knows what in regards to sensitive business information will also be a smart decision. Thank you so much. Hope this was helpful.